Now in our software analysis and design program, I was discussing with you regarding various ways on how you can design your program. For example, first of all, it was your analysis area. And in the analysis area, what you do is that you create an analysis of your software and your program. And depending upon how you take the analysis, I discussed with you that the first cycle is analysis. In your analysis area, you discuss with your subject that what should be the requirements. We discuss observations, questionnaires, interviews, existing documents. Just after this, we discussed regarding 7.2, and in 7.2, this is basically regarding your program design, that how you are structuring or designing your program regarding your file structures or data structures. We have already discussed this as well, the data types as well. And then I discussed with you regarding the validation routines, that why are they used, because they are used to check that if your data entered is correct or not. We discussed input formats, we discussed output formats, and then we just after the analysis and design area, I started with the development and testing part. Testing, ma'am, I discussed with you regarding that how you are able to test your data and all of the compiled files, such as testing your data structure, testing your files, testing your input methods, output formats, or validation rules. Now, in today's class, I'm going to discuss with you regarding the implementation and documentation and evaluation of your software. So, in terms of the implementation, implementation is the fourth stage of your program development lifecycle, and I only went to this stage just after I have completed the previous ones, so that now I can implement what is the basic scope of my program. Like for example, right in front of you, you can see that transfer paper files or electronic files to the new system. And the key functionalities of these three is that I have to scan in the document, I have to input some key in the data, and I also need to download files to a new database. This is how I am implementing it. You need to understand that what does an implementation means. Implementation means that how I am implementing different tasks, or how I am implementing the correct software, like this. For example, I can also give you the example of changeover to the new system. Just give me a moment. Again, change over to the new system. We need to discuss that how can we implement the direct changeovers, the parallel runnings of the files, or how I can implement the implementation of different software. These are the changeovers to the existing or new systems. But right here, I am only discussing regarding that how I'm going to work on this, how I'm going to implement this. So let's discuss. I know that you might be having some difficulties in it, but let's discuss one by one that what are the methods involved used in the part of the implementation. Okay, so the first method of your implementation is the one that is direct, and the design of this implementation means that with a direct implementation, With this method, the old system is going to be stopped by overnight and new system is going to be introduced immediately. However, there can be certain advantages and disadvantages as well. For example, this method can be disastrous because if the new system fails, you will not be having your last system available. The benefits of the direct one are immediate and cost is also reduced because only one system is used because there is no need to pay for two set of staffs in your direct implementation. Direct implementations basically means that now I'm not even creating a backup. Whatever changes are given to me, whatever the software is provided to me, I'm just directly implementing them. So sometimes it happens that whenever you are implementing new software, there are challenges, there are problems, and you might come across a situation where your old system is no longer working and your new system is not working as well. I can also give you the example of a parallel as well. In parallel with this implementation, the old and new systems are run side by side for a time before the new system takes it over altogether. Now, this has that one advantage that just in case, for example, if one system even fails, the other one is line by line working. So we have a support, we have a backup. If this system fails, the old system is also available because it is used for your backup. It can be used to train your staffs. However, it is a more expensive than direct one because now when you are working with two systems, that means you need extra staff to run both of the systems, and it is also time consuming than direct one because data needs to be entered by the two systems. In the pilot implementation stage in this method, the new system is introduced into one branch or office of the company. You might have heard an office or an organization might have different departments, might have different categories, like, for example, accounts, finance, marketing. However, you cannot just implement the software in all of those places at once. In pilot method, what I usually do is that I introduce them into a one company, into a one branch, so that I can assess its performance. And just after this happens, I can further introduce them to the other branches as well. In this, if the new system fails, only one part is effective, that one category, that one department. The remaining ones remain unaffected. It is also possible to train staff in one area as well, and the costs are also less because only one part of the system is being tested. I hope I'm clear to you. You can stop me anytime you want to. Now, in your phased implementation stage, with this method, only part of the new system is introduced. Now, in your phased implementation, only part of the new system is introduced, and only when it proves to work satisfactorily is then the next part introduced, and so on until the system is fully replaced. So, in your phased one, what you usually do is that you are creating segments, you are creating phases of your analysis or software part. What you do is that you first go through the first phase of your system to check that if it is working or not. If it works, then it's correct. However, if it's not correct, you move on to the second phase and you move on to the third phase until your work is fully completed. In this implementation, if the latest part of it fails, it is only necessary to go back into the system to the any point of failure. Since this is not disastrous, you can always proceed backward. But this can be expensive than direct one because it is also necessary to evaluate each phase. You must be sure that if each phase is working or not. And if you are checking that if each phase is working or not, that means it is also time consuming. It is taking a lot of your time. It is expending a lot of your work as well. So please mention me if you have any queries and questions in these stages of implementation and stages.
I have a query in stages of implementation in phased.
Beta phased means that what you are basically doing is that you have a software and in spite of implementing it all at once, what you are doing is that you are creating a parts of that, you are creating a phases of that. And how you implement it, for example, let's take an example of an accounting software. An accounting software has many functions, like it has its inventories, it has its pricing, it has its stock, it has its banking channels as well. So how I'm going to implement this in the phased version is that first of all, I'm going to implement the first part. I'm going to implement the first phase of that. That for example, now I only want the fees of the students directly added into my system. This is my first phase. If this is successful, then what I'm going to do is then I'm going to add all of the previously paid student fees into my system. That is the second phase. And if that works properly in the third phase, what I'm going to do is I'm going to integrate my system whole of it. So you see, I have advantages. In the first phase, I check that if it is working or not. If it's going good, then I can continue to the next phase. Again, I check with the second phase that if it is correct or not, and if it's correct, then I move on to the next one. And if it is not, I can either stop there or I can either go back to the my earlier stage. So these mean that I have created different parts of my implementation stage. I have created different phases of that. Is this clear?
Yes, it's
For example, how can be the advantage and disadvantage of this method? It can be that if the latest part fails, it is only necessary to go back in the system. You can go back. Your second point is that it is more expensive. Why is that? Because you need more working people to work on it. It is more time consuming because every part has to be tested and it also has to ensure that the system works properly. So, is this clear to you, all these four parts?
yes.
Now, I'm going to discuss with you the documentation part. And in your documentation part, this is one of the important area where now when your system is fully developed, now you need an amount of documentation as well that needs to be produced for the people who want to modify it or develop it or to the end users. So they can look at that piece of document and they can edit that software or piece of code. So this is the reason that why I should have a documentation. I'm repeating it back again. Once the system is fully developed, now you need amount of documentation for that. Why do you need that? Because there might be people who want to modify or develop the system in the future at some later stage or for your end customers. Like for example, if you buy anything new, box packed, it could be anything, maybe a laptop or a mobile phone or any electronic appliance. It always comes along with a booklet. What is the function of that booklet? The function of that booklet is that it provides you a basic details on how to operate it. Similarly, when you are done creating your piece of software and you have passed with all of these stages, now you need to document that. And the first type of the documentation that I have is the technical documentation. Now, technical documentation, this is basically designed to help programmers, analysts to make improvements to your system since it's a technical documentation. It tells you that what is your software requirement, what is your hardware requirement, what is your input format, what is your output format, what are your validation rules, your errors, your file structures, your bugs, your program flowchart, your limitations, like all of the things that we have discussed in our last classes. All of these things have to be documented here. Whereas in your user documentation, it is used to design to help your user that how you can use the software. Like, for example, if you are purchasing any new electronic application or appliance, you will be having a user documentation along with that. What is the usage of that user documentation? Is that it basically helps the user to learn how should I use the software. Like this can include that how should I open it, how should I close it, how should I save it, how do I search it, how do I print it, like all of the hows, how can you do it, and all of these things. So this is included in your user documentation, but you need to understand the difference between a user documentation and a technical documentation. That is that if that is that in your technical documentation, you can see that you are basically talking in terms of technical knowledge, that what are your technicalities, but in your user documentation, you are only and only focusing on your user. You are focusing on yourself, that you as a user, how you are going to use it. And on the technical documentation side, you are basically focusing on your programmer, on your analyst, that further this document can help you, guide you on how to make this software correct, or what are the things that are included into this software. So, do you have any confusion in this part, documentation?
No,
Do you have any queries?
no, I don't.
Now, Bete, the last area is your evaluation one, 7.6. And in your evaluation part now, when your system is good and running, it is successfully implemented now, you need to work on some evaluations, and you can even carry out maintenance if it is necessary. Why should I contain a maintenance? Because sometimes there might be different user requirements. For example, your client might ask you to add in or add out different options alternatively. So this is the reason that you might be looking for an evaluation. The following is a list of something you should be considered while you are creating an evaluation, that how well your new system can work. Like for example, you can compare the final solutions with the original task requirements to check that, sir, the main requirement of my software was this, and is the software I created or the solution I created, is this even compelling with the original one or not, right? Then again, in the second area, you need to search for the identify any limitations of the system, that if a system has any limitation. You can also consider identifying any necessary improvements that needs to be made into a system if they are necessary. You can also evaluate the user responses, and user responses can be done by different analysis area, questionnaires, interviews, all of this we discussed. In your evaluation, you can even compare the results from the new system and the others as well. You can compare performance, you can observe performance, you can measure the time, you can interview them, you can questionnaire, you can provide them a questionnaire. So some task has to be updated and evaluated. And why this usually happens, but this might be because of your hardware, because there may be some updates available of hardware, and new hardware comes in the market, there can be necessary changes as well. For example, if any hardware is changed, any computer is changed, so you just need to make sure that if your software or your program is successfully working with that or not. Changes within the company requires new devices to be added or updated, yes, and you even want to update your software because your user might want to ask something new, or it could be that if you are changing it to your company structure, or if there is a task from your boss that you want to change it this way, or there can be any other policy or legislation that it might affect your use of software. So this is the reason that why do I need to evaluate? So whenever you are evaluating, you have two different things. You have either a hardware or you have either a software. And why is that? As I discussed, hardware because there can be new hardwares added or updated, and softwares because some softwares might require some policies like all of the things I explained to you. So do you have any queries in evaluation?
No, not till now.